Hello, everyone. My name's Orion Lens, and you're tuning into the Outabox podcast. Hey everybody, and welcome to the show again. Well, this is our second episode, and as you can probably hear in the background, my computer is going off like a jet engine, so part of the noise. I'll try to edit that out as soon as possible, so that you don't have to hear anything in the final product. But man, if you could hear this, this... And the funny thing is I asked it to do a simple task, maybe like open up Chrome, and maybe open up, one tab. Ooh, I know that's a backbreaker, but my goodness, the computer has to be a big baby about it and complain with its fan, What is the deal with RAM? I'm going to go into Jerry Seinfeld mode. What's the deal with the RAM on the computer? No, I won't do that. That'll be terrible, that'll be horrible, and that's kind of a bad impression. Maybe if I had more time to prepare, I could do a better impression for you guys. So anyway, that's that. And at the end of the day, I'm probably going to edit out that noise in the background. I'll use the noise reduction on the software that I have. So, guys don't have to hear anything. And that'll be good and cleared up and ready to go. So anyway, this is going to be a little bit of a special episode because I actually have a few announcements for you guys for the foreseeable future of the show and the channel in general. So I think the biggest item of business that we're going to go over is what you've probably seen on the first episode in the text at the beginning, where we basically announced that this program is no longer a subsidy of Fourth Cinema of the University of California, Merced anymore. There were a couple reasons for us going independent, but long story short, this works out better for us because we have a lot more autonomy over who we invite as guests and what we can do with the show. So hopefully you guys will enjoy the increased creativity that our show is going to try to have. Whoopee, party time. But it is exciting. It is exciting that we get to have a little more creative input with the show and more autonomy of what we can actually do with it. So part of it is there's no longer going to be a distinction between artists who are off and on campus. So now the show will combine the Creator Baiter and the Homegrown Great segments into one, which will basically just be the Creator Baiter all in one. So two of those segments are basically going to become one, which is under the Creator Baiter title. However, in addition to that, there's actually going to be a new segment of the show, and we're pleased to announce the super creative title of Art News. Art News! It's Art News! Yeah, it's news about art. That's really cool. Yeah. So anyway, what this segment is going to do is kind of look over some of the headlines in the art world and share them with you so that you and I together can become a little more cultured and a little more informed what's going on. Believe me, we need to do this together so that we can, both become a little more cultured through the topics of the show. It's a learning experience for the both of us. I guess it implies that there's only one other person, that's listening to the show, which I hope that's not the case. I hope that there's multitudes of people watching the show out there. Oh yes, there's going to be so many people. I just have the feeling of it. In fact, one of these days I'm just going to have to walk around campus wearing sunglasses and a raincoat, trying to avoid the public. So I guess that's what I have to do now. Not really, because really we don't have much of an audience now, but there will come a day where we will have hopefully a decent audience. And for those of you who are listening and tuning in regularly, because we care about the little guy at the Outabox podcast, and so we're looking out for you there, the little listener worker dude. Okay, I don't know if you're a worker dude, but anyway, we're sidetracked. So anyway, let's get right into this art news segment. First off, with a film called Loving Vincent, they've recently announced the dates for the US release of this film. And what is so special about it is that this is going to be the first fully painted animated film in animation history. I mean, this is a pretty monumental piece of artwork here. Loving Vincent, as the title probably suggests, is kind of the life story of Van Gogh, which is interestingly told through the subjects that he's painted over the years. So a lot of the famous Van Gogh paintings that have actual people in them are actually going to come alive and tell the story of his life. So that's a little bit of an interesting angle there. Notable fact about this film, this required over 66,000 different frames, which started as a full oil painting and then was painted over until the last frame was made. So to clarify that, what that basically means is that you started out with a painting and they drew over it for each movement or each frame that the character is doing in that sequence. And then once that specific sequence is done, they were left with that painting as is. So that became the final product of the painting. And when we say 66,000 frames, that's basically the different paintings and the different painted movements in between that. So there were 66,000 of that. Just to compare that size would cover the whole of Manhattan and London on the canvases that they were painted on. So yeah, that's quite an undertaking. I mean, what madman would do that? Man, I kind of wonder how much it actually costs to do that. Because they would have to spend the money on the acrylics, or no, not acrylics, stupid, oil painting on oil paint. So I wonder how much money was invested in that. Of course, like any other production in the history of the world, they probably spent the most money on the actors, That's just the way it goes, You can have the most elaborate budget for the special effects or for the practical effects or whatever, but, it all comes down to getting those household names in it, right? I guess so. And speaking of the actors, kind of an interesting thing for me is that Chris O'Dowd's going to be in this movie. Where are my It Crowd fans out there? Yeah, Chris O'Dowd. He was one of the guys. I think his name was Roy, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Roy from the It Crowd is going to be in the movie about Van Gogh, and we're going to see hundreds of different paintings of this guy. So I guess since he's in it, I guess Vincent's only problem is that he didn't try turning it off and on again. Yeah, I can just imagine Chris O'Dowd. He probably doesn't change his accent in this. So I can imagine him coming up to Vince saying, "Oh, you silly bastard, you didn't have to cut off your ear. Oh, you didn't try turning it off and on again. The computers, Vincent, the computers. The paintings, Vincent, the paintings." I don't know if that was a good Irish accent or not, but I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of angry comments for that little bit of impressionism. Hey, another lame pun. Also, Saoirse Ronan is going to be in this movie. Now, actually, this is kind of the main draw of the film because Saoirse Ronan has been known to be a pretty well-respected actress over the years. She's actually been nominated for an Oscar twice in her young life. She's only 23. But man, it seems like she's doing a lot of good stuff lately. I don't know who her agent is, but man, keep up the good work. You're getting one of your clients some good work over the years. I mean, if you don't know Saoirse Ronan, she was the main actress in Brooklyn, and I guess another film that most people would know her from is The Grand Budapest Hotel. I can't think of anything. Well, I know other things that she's been in, but for our audience out there, at least something that they might recognize. I'm trying to think of something. So moving on to the next piece of news, Alexander Calder. You should know this guy. If you don't, he's one of the more important sculptors of the 20th century. He's the guy who actually invented the mobile, that hanging sculpture that hangs from the ceiling. They put it in all the nurseries and stuff. So pretty influential guy, I guess. There is a new biography on him by a guy named Jed Perry. Pearl. Jed Pearl. He's doing a biography on him, and it shows that kind of likes to explain that Calder was more of a mathematician than anything else, because the concept of the mobile is that you have to make sure that the sculpture is perfectly balanced if it's going to hang up in the air correctly. So it kind of delves into Calder's more mathematical side and more meticulous craftsman side, rather than his artistic take. I mean, there's a little bit of his artistic take in there, but it's really about Calder the craftsman. At least that's what I'm getting out of it, out of what the news has been saying about it, or at least the one site that I've been on that has been telling me about this. This site is actually called ArtNet News. You can go look it up on the internet. They say that it was one of the top sites to get a feed on art news. And transitioning into the next piece of news, one of their more interesting articles, I would say, is this piece called "Is the Museum of Ice Cream the Future of Culture?" Ooh, that was a hook, so I had to click on it. And so it reads, "Is the Museum of Ice Cream the future of culture? If museums aren't careful, it might be," says a new study. So it's basically going into this concept for the Museum of Ice Cream, which is, I think, a real thing. It's more of a carnival-esque party center rather than an actual museum where you get to kind of play and take pictures for Instagram. What they're saying is that this sort of culture with young people might actually become more popular and eventually replace the traditional museum or the traditional ballet or opera. Not too unprecedented, honestly. It is coming from a site called ArtNet News, where it's like, the plebeians are going to take over now. We're not going to have a ballet and art anymore. But I understand where a little bit of their gripes are coming from. People do need to learn about stuff, and people should, be active participants in learning about culture. But you see, maybe this is the difference in generations. Because for me personally, I actually do not prefer going to museums, because honestly, at the end of the day, I can just look up stuff on the internet or read about it. You get more information. It's a lot cheaper to do so. And overall, I actually enjoy the reading experience a little bit more than maybe the kinetic experience of the museum. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But I think the only reason to go to a museum nowadays is to actually go to something like an exhibition, and maybe a traveling exhibition, where you actually get to see artifacts that are world-renowned, stuff that you might only see once in a lifetime. And so anyway, that wraps up the art news segment of the program, and we're going to go right into We Create, Therefore We Are. I would consider this a pretty current topic for what we're going to talk about today. Me and Justin Gonzalez, the president of the UC Merced Fourth Cinema Club, are going to talk about the new Blade Runner movie and how it compares to the original. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem.
Yeah, and so anyway, after, what is it now, 35 years or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. We finally get a sequel to the Blade Runner with Blade Runner 2049.
Yes.
Yes.
2049.
2049. That would be pretty far in the future if it was 21. But so we follow the latest inclination of the replicant, which is actually going to hunt other replicants now, with Ryan Gosling as the main character. And we find out later in the film that he is central in some sort of uprising. Guys, for those of you who are listening out there, this is definitely major spoiler alert, because it's, for us anyway, it's a lot more fun to talk about if you go into like all the details and stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if he's going to be central to the revolution of these Nexus, because I'm still kind of convinced that he dies.
Yeah, at the end?
Yeah, at the end. And after the second viewing, because I've seen it 2 times now, I'm pretty convinced that Ryan Gosling, it's alluded that he dies because of the music that they play during the scene. If you pay attention to the music that they play during the scene, it's the same music that plays in the first Blade Runner when, I'm blanking on the replicant's name, but the main replicant that Deckard is hunting, it's the same music that they play when he has his death monologue.
Yeah, it's the same Vangelis score.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was looking like he was dying too because he was on the floor, he was on his knees. It's like he looks like he was running out of steam.
Yeah. So we really jumped into like the ending here, but like there's a lot to build up to there.
Oh yeah, well, what mean by like the whole introduction about him being central to the revolution, it's like he finds out halfway through the film that he could be because he believes that oh he's the chosen one who was born of replicant and maybe replicant parent. That's another
Maybe
big
human,
spoiler.
maybe human, maybe replicant. I
Yeah.
mean, this film just maybe asks more questions than answers, and it makes me a little skeptical of what the next film, if there's going to be a next film, might look like because it didn't do as well as they thought it would opening week.
Oh yeah, I heard like the first day it was majorly under the predictions. It was
Yeah, it
kind of
was. I
sad
don't know what
actually.
the word.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the first Blade Runner is definitely a cult classic in that it didn't make any money, or it made relatively low amounts of money. But if you looked at it, Blade Runner 2049 has already made more money than Blade Runner the original are made in its entire run.
Yeah, but also you got to factor in that this film is a lot more expensive. I think it's like somewhere in like 185.
Yeah, it's a lot. It was a lot, big budget, and the director. It was like a heavy hitter director, and uh, Dennis, or what's his name? I
De-
forget his name.
it's like Dennis Villeneuve or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
the
same guy
first
who did
one.
Arrival, which he got an Oscar nomination for last year. So I guess now he's becoming a bigger name with like Sicario and then Arrival and stuff like that. And yeah, it's kind of like you feel disappointed at this. It's like really out of all the remakes out there, you pick this one to not see the one that's actually getting good reviews.
This one was really good, and it was the first one that I felt wasn't the cash grab.
Yeah, like I mean, what else came out this year? Like there was like Spider-Man: Homecoming. I didn't see that, but I heard it was okay. Like other like continuations of series or like
Did
sequels, prequels, or remakes and stuff like that.
did Batman v Superman come out this year?
Was that early this year?
I'm not 100%, but those are like prime examples of like just sort of they're movies that are candy. Like they're fun to watch once and then kind of like throw away. But I feel like a movie like Blade Runner 2049 and the first Blade Runner, it's a mixture of like the big box office movie, but then also something that'll make you think because there's a lot of metaphors throughout the entirety of the movie that are like not in your face about it, but they are still there. Like one thing that I noticed after the second viewing, after the fight with Kay and Love, when they were like kind of they were struggling, they were swimming back to shore. It's sort of like the rebirth of the replicant. Like how all life comes from the ocean. They are crawling out of the ocean to then go towards whatever revolution or whatever next evolution the Nexus will have.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, like just throughout the entirety of the film, and it's definitely a movie to watch in theaters.
Oh yeah, this film is visually gorgeous.
Yeah,
And
I don't know the name of the cinematographer off the top of my head, but he's apparently worked on a lot of big movies and a lot of really cinematic movies.
oh no no no, the guy's Roger Deakins.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah
That's
yeah yeah, like this guy is basically like the Meryl Streep of the cinematography world. Like he usually gets like a nomination every year of whatever film he works on.
what did he work on previously?
He worked on a lot of Coen Brothers movies. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I think No
Okay.
Country for Old Men. The one that I really noticed, like just as a standalone quality of the film, was Skyfall, because I like that was one of the first things that I really liked about Skyfall was the actual cinematography because I remember the scene where it's like they're blending in the blue light with the red fire and stuff like that. I mean, it was pretty brilliant visually, and so yeah, they got just a damn good cast overall, or crew. I mean, the cast is good also, but
Yeah.
just a good crew altogether.
Another thing that I liked about this film was the lighting. And that contributed to the fact that almost all the sets were practical and that they went in and added like fluff with CGI. they didn't make CGI be the entirety of the movie. Like they didn't pull a Star Wars Phantom Menace where the entire environment is made of CGI, but they built a lot of practical sets. Like all the Jared Leto sets, all the sets that he was involved with, he said that they had built out a lot of those sets.
Yeah, so it's not like a mixture of green screen or anything like that. It's like they actually built out like the business office and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So one of the things that I find most interesting about the film, and it's kind of in the opening first act of the movie, is the relationship between Kay and Joy. And after the second viewing of the film, I feel a little worse about their relationship in the fact that it felt real in the first viewing, but then in the second viewing, I had my skeptical nature come in, and I'm just not really sure if that relationship was legitimate, if they like really loved each other, or if it was just a simulation.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of difficult to assess that because really when you're first introduced to them as a couple, he does seem very detached and uninterested in her, but honestly, one of the most emotionally gripping parts of the film is when they destroy her, and he has to see her getting stomped.
Yeah.
So, what about it did you find in the later viewing that kind of made you think differently?
Well, it was mainly the scene where he's walking out. He had just gotten beaten by Love. He's like covered in the bandages. And then he walks out onto the scaffolding when he's just told that he has to kill Deckard so the revolution can live on, basically. And he's also just told that he's not the chosen one, which is a completely other thing. But now he's walking out. He sees one of the advertisements for Joy. And it's, the big naked hologram. And the big naked hologram comes up and, like, starts talking to him. And she reiterates lines that, Joy, said throughout the movie, like, you look like a real good Joe, or what a day, things like that. So, and then once that scene is over, and once she's done talking, the hologram basically walks back to the billboard, and then it says everything you want to hear, see, things like that. So, I feel that and if you look at their relationship throughout the entirety of the movie, Joy is telling Ryan Gosling what he wants to hear, in that he's special, or that he was born and he was loved, things like that. So I kind of feel like it wasn't as genuine. Like it wasn't like the movie Her. Like I feel like that love story was a legitimate love story, and they made it so that it was a legitimate love story. But with Kay and Joy's relationship, I think it was all just kind of a simulation, which then goes along with a lot of the themes of Blade Runner, and that replicants are a simulation, or they're basically like breaking down the world and then building it back up.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I thought that maybe I was dumb for not realizing this, but I was thinking, is that supposed to be an advertisement, for her, or was it a completely different person? But yeah, because they did look a little different, but it's just because of the simulation. But yeah, since they reiterate the same lines that she did in the apartment, yeah, it makes it more clear then. And that also kind of goes into how Kay is evolving as an android.
Yeah, he's becoming sentient throughout the movie.
Yeah, he's becoming a lot more sentient, and he's becoming a lot more self-aware of the world around him. Not that he wasn't in the beginning, because he still was aware that she was a hologram and that she was designed to do it. But it's really his Bildungsroman for the K character, where you see him at a time be uninterested in her. Then when he loses her, he gets a little more emotional. But then now he's starting to realize, like, okay, I got to put things in perspective now. And this is kind of part of his own personal adventure, his own personal growth as a more complex machine, which in turn kind of makes him a more complex conscious organism in general.
Yeah, almost like more human than human, as they say throughout the entirety of the movie. The replicants become more human than human. through these experiences.
Yeah.
But I there's there's another aspect that we should talk about, which is the whole arc of is he the child?
Yeah.
I felt that throughout the movie, so they were basically setting up to he's the child, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that interested me was that so that doctor, she creates the memories for the replicants so they react more human. But my question is why does Kay have the implanted memory that's her memory? And it seemed to me like I want to see what you think of this, but when they're talking about the revolution, um, she says, "Oh, we all wish it was us." So does that mean that they all have that memory implanted in them?
That's what I thought. Um, because they wouldn't have had those same realizations if they didn't have the memory themselves. So that was very intentional on her part, I think. Because she has a revolutionary mindset in general, where she's implanting, presumably under not under surveillance of the human world. She's doing this as a covert operation, where she's implanting the same memory in each of the androids.
So you think the doctor knows that she's basically Deckard's daughter and that she's part of the revolution?
Yeah, I think so because when they were actually kind of putting the pieces together, and once you see that cut of her, working on the machine, at least I got sort of the intuition that, oh yeah, she's reminiscing about that.
Hmm. And when Kay is basically showing her the memory. Is that what you're referencing, where she basically like kind of breaks down in tears when she's viewing Kay's memory?
Well, I guess also that, but I'm more referencing the part where kind of the editing of the film makes it flashes back to her when they're making the actual connection that she's the daughter of Deckard, and I don't know why, but kind of the look that she had on her face kind of made me think that, oh, she realizes what's going on and she actually realizes the weight of the situation that she's in.
Hmm. Interesting. Because I don't know if I buy that she's like in on the revolution.
Well, I mean, I think just thinking that, how else would they have known about the memory then? I mean, at least unless they knew that it was implanted into him specifically. But then again, why would they wish that it was them if they didn't experience that, or at least they thought they experienced that to begin with?
Hmm.
Because they would have had to make that arc themselves.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that they would all have to go through a journey similar to Kay's in some way.
Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. The whole story of the chosen one.
Man, California's in a rough spot, especially San Diego.
It
you
is.
know,
It's
literally a
basically
dumpster.
garbage heap. Yep.
But they
It's deep.
they already kind of like right from the get go, they already comment on like the whole, oh, we were too late with the whole global warming thing and the climate change. Like it
Oh
literally
yeah,
says that in the intro scroll.
yeah. And another thing that's interesting is that if you notice in the original Blade Runner, there's those flames jetting out of the I don't know what you would call it, but the whole skyline is basically consumed with the flames jetting out of buildings, and that's basically like gas powered. So in the original Blade Runner, everything is gas powered because you can clearly see these flames. But then if you look at the skyline in Blade Runner 2049, it opens with solar farms.
Yeah,
So I mean that's also just interesting in the way that they built the world.
yeah, and they kind of updated it to kind of play with our current conscious about, oh, what technology we're going to need in the future and stuff like that. Even protein farming, like kind of like in Snowpiercer, where you're farming bugs basically.
Yeah, they were farming larvae,
Yeah,
and in Snowpiercer they were farming cockroaches, right?
I think cockroaches or beetles are one of those two. I don't remember, but yeah, it's bugs all the same. And Batista, the bug farmer, I love it how he like came out in like the old like the farmer overalls and shit. You know, just like we're gonna have a throwback to like the Great Depression '30s type California farmer there.
Yeah,
Is it is
it's
it
really sparse.
yeah, and a surprisingly good performance by Batista in this one. Like, I mean,
You
not that
know,
he's been bad, but like
he was actually one of the highest billed actors for the entire movie.
for that
He
cameo.
was paid, yeah, he was paid fourth highest behind Ryan Gosling or Harrison Ford, Ryan Gosling, and then the actor who played Joy. And then it was Batista. So it went Harrison Ford, Ryan Gosling, and Armas, and then Dave Batista for the highest paid.
So really, even Jared Leto didn't get more than that.
No, top billed are those four. He made
That
makeshift
must be a big
cameos
blow to the ego
to
that
good
is
old
Jared
Jared
Leto.
Leto.
Yeah, Jared Ego,
I mean, if you think
Lego.
about it, he was in the movie like what, four times?
Yeah, he was not in that often actually,
And I wonder
but
if that
still
was,
more than Batista.
yeah, for sure, more than Batista. But it's kind of interesting that both of those characters had the short films made for them before the movie. So there was a film of Jared Leto, Jared Leto's character, the company that he's basically heading that just absorbed Terrell. So his Wallace Corporation is going to basically showcase in this short film that the replicants that they make obey entirely. And the way that he does this is he literally makes a replicant kill itself with glass. I think it was glass. Either like makes it slit its own throat or something along those lines.
Yeah,
And then Batista's short film was about Batista just trying to live as a normal person and basically navigating life as a replicant and hiding.
yeah. Did they say how long he was in hiding for?
Um, he was in the war in Calanthra. He was a medic, so I believe he deserted. Um, I don't know the exact year. I think they actually said the child was born in 2021. So he was at that farm by 2021 because he witnessed the birth of the child. And that's obvious in the opening monologue where he says, "You newer models are basically okay with cleaning up the shit because you haven't seen a miracle, and that miracle is the child." But at that point, you don't know what the miracle is. Um, but the child was born in 2021. I believe it was what 10/6/2021. The engraving below the wooden pony.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the
and on
story
the
for,
tree, isn't it?
oh yeah, it's engraved on the tree on the grave as well.
Yeah,
So Batista's short film "Nowhere to Run" took place in 2048, and in that time, just a year before that, he was in actually the city of LA. I'm pretty sure trying to sell some more of his protein. I'm pretty sure it was protein. It was little worms. So that's what he was doing.
yeah. And man, like even in the first one, they explain that yeah, these replicants are much stronger and much more agility, or how would you say it? Like have much more agility and
Yeah.
almost equal intelligence. But man, that really comes into play when he's smashing Ryan Gosling through the wall. Like
Yeah, and
bam.
that show of force was really interesting because obviously we're like, how can Kay, keep up with this? Because like they did a really good job in advertising the film where they didn't give away that Kay was a replicant. So you go into this fight not knowing that Kay is one of the newer model replicants, but he is, so he can keep up with this fight. But then going back to the original Blade Runner, getting into the whole, I don't know, do you want to get into the whole debate if Deckard is a replicant?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if we take that fight between Kay and Batista's character, um, Kay is able to keep up, and he eventually is able to kill him. So one of the arguments that I've heard is that Deckard has to be a replicant because he is one of the only people that could keep up with replicants in combat.
Yeah, it is interesting. I Yeah, because even in the first one, they were hitting him. Like they were doing that weird like slap on the side of the head thing with him, and for a replicant, that would have been like I don't know how many times harder than a human would have done. Yeah, I
I
guess
mean,
there's
granted, he does get the shit kicked out of him almost at every encounter with a replicant, but he's still able to survive.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that speaks more if Deckard is just a really resourceful human, or if he has replicant in him. Like, does he have replicant in him?
And that kind of goes back to the whole near end scene with Deckard. And it's like, if he isn't a replicant, then what are they alluding to? Are they alluding to the fact that it was just a government conspiracy? You know, that those two got together, or is he actually a replicant? I mean, which
Yeah,
one would
like
seem more likely at the end of the day?
yeah, and is his falling in love, um, is his falling in love a planned, calculated response, or is it real? And that goes to Harrison Ford's conversation with Jared Leto's character, where he says he knows what's real, but he doesn't. They don't tell the audience what's real.
Yeah, they keep it in the dark, don't they? It's like it's not like in Episode 7 where it's like your father, Han Solo, like in
Yeah,
your
yeah.
face. But yeah, it's more like they say, "Oh, don't you think it might be a bit planned that you guys were, eloping there?" And so yeah,
But Wallace could be bluffing there too.
yeah,
And then he brings out a Rachel, so he's like a Rachel replicant. He's trying to bring out all the cards to basically get the secret to where the replicant is that can have more baby replicants. So was he bluffing? Was he not bluffing? I don't know.
yeah, because that was his plan, because he was not making enough replicants in time. And so that
Yeah.
was that was his whole thing. It's like, oh, we need to get the replicants to procreate and make new ones. And when you think about it, I think that kind of changes the whole ending of the first one if you look at him as a replicant, because at that point, just watching the first one, you think, oh, he realizes that the replicant is more human than the human at the end of the first one. At this point, what would be the new message of the first one at the end? Did he intentionally save him? Did the I forgot his name too, but the bad guy in the first one, does he know something that Deckard did not at that point, tying into the whole conspiracy that he might be part of a revolution?
Well, that brings up the question: is how long has this revolution been playing out? So it was Batty. Roy Batty was the replicant in the original. He was the leader of the clan of replicants that Deckard basically hunts down. So I think that Batty originally saves Harrison because all of these movies, Blade Runner, or the original Blade Runner, and Blade Runner 2049 are all very existential films to me, where it asks questions of what does it mean to be human, and like does your life really matter, and things like that. So I'd always been of the mindset of that Batty saved Deckard because he just wanted to be remembered in some little way. If he's remembered by Deckard,
Yeah,
then
I want
it's
to
like
live on.
yeah, it's like he actually lived like a person.
Yeah.
I don't know. These Blade Runner, the writers ask a lot of interesting questions about humanity while like encompassed in this sci-fi world.
Yeah, and a lot of symbolism as well, like especially religious symbolism.
Yeah,
Like,
especially with the soul and the eye.
yeah, I was thinking about the dove at the end, where at least in the end of the first one, when Roy dies, the dove flies away, like almost like no, I think searching for and finding the new land.
Yeah, and the question also is that was that a replicant dove or was it a real life dove?
Yeah, so even that could be a little bit of a change, depending on whether it is a part of the whole revolution going on.
I would be interested to know because so with the whole Blade Runner Blackout, the animated short story before that, I would be interested in wondering if they were part of the revolutionary set that is operating in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, because it seems like it's established, doesn't it? Like it's
Yeah,
already kind of established.
yeah, they have a lot of members, and they all just walk out of the shadows like super badass revolutionists. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, is this already been in play for a long time, and was the blackout part of the revolutionaries doing, and they've just stayed underground until they're ready and equipped to basically take over the world.
Yeah, it's almost like that Roy was kind of like the Vladimir Lenin of the androids, and then all the other countries around them are following suit. And
That's interesting.
yeah,
That would be interesting. I
yeah.
don't know, but then that
Commie bots.
commie bots, they're the humans revolution.
Hey, but you got the guy from Death Wish to hunt them down because they're goddamn commies, right?
Damn. True.
Yeah. If you want to talk about the trailers at the end, that's also fine. But going back to what were we saying before about like if they're in on it, like the Roy originally was?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he was or wasn't. I can't even begin to imagine like how the story is going to go, like where it's come from in the original story of being a noir. And now in 2049, I feel like it kind of goes between a love story and a noir story. And now I'm wondering how it's going to progress. And is it going to be a war story next? Because they're setting up for a violent revolution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first one was kind of a love story as well.
That's true. That's true. But like, it was sort of a classic noir love story if you think about it. And even like the imagery of them meeting, Rachel smoking a cigarette, things like that.
Yeah, like the femme fatale type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what they're setting it up for. They're setting it up for like the bloody revolution for this next one.
And I think that's kind of splitting from what Blade Runner is and why everyone likes it so much or loves it so much. And if it's just an all-out war movie next, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it.
Yeah, because I mean, like there are differences between this one and the first one, but at least it is kind of the same, you know, detective story at the end of the day, where it does base itself off. It is a genre blender, you know. It isn't a straight sci-fi movie and it isn't a straight noir. You know, it was actually I think you could say that Blade Runner was one of the first genre blenders out there.
Yeah, the cyberpunk, but also film noir.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you notice in the first, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but the first one, it's definitely a grimy, gritty, like world. Just physically, it's filthy. I
Yeah.
felt this one was a lot cleaner.
Well, I felt that the world was cleaner because we were looking at it through the eyes of a replicant that was for sure a replicant. You knew Kay was a replicant. So they always say more human than human. Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for the characteristics of these replicants? So I think that means that Kay would have like an ideal apartment, and if you look around, nothing was out of sort, nothing was messy, everything was trimmed and kept. But then once you stepped outside that world and he was, walking through the halls of his apartment, they wrote skin job on his door. People were screaming at him as he walked. And I feel that like since you're looking at it through the lens of this replicant, the world might not seem as dirty and grimy. But then there's also the fact of the matter that most of the transition shots in this, it's of Kay flying through, the air in his car, rather than when Deckard was sometimes going through the world, he navigated it on the streets.
Yeah.
So
So
it might still just be as dirty, or it might be conditions of life might be slightly better, but I still think that it kind of keeps with that grime in some ways.
yeah, he's more part of like the mechanical world that they've set up. So he's more part of the he's one of the cogs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we still got the the police job. Man, talk about a difference in police chiefs between the first one and this one.
I mean, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. If you see some of the deleted scenes from the original, the police chief in the original was really racist.
Oh well, you haven't seen the voiceover Blade Runner, have you?
No, I've only seen the final cut, the Ridley Scott cut.
Yeah, because like even like in the voiceover version, I don't know which one that is. It's not the theatrical either. It's like it's one of the director's cuts or whatever. But yeah, even Decker like says, if he was in L.A. like 40 years ago, he would have called black people the N-word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember seeing that in like a YouTube review where they said that, and I was like, whoa.
yeah,
Because I don't know if racism really exists in this world. I guess it kind of does, where if you look at the way that the world is structured, it's all of the minorities kind of in the dirt and grime. And then if you look at the Tyrell Company or the Wallace Company, it is kind of more white if you think about it.
yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anybody in a position of power that is a minority in this world,
The
and
one thing that I could think is there was a black woman who was buying replicants for the off-world mining colony.
but that's just like a cameo or like a little
That
snippet.
was just that's just like a
Yeah,
kind of throwaway role, but I mean, it is something where some of these minorities are business
yeah,
owners. But I think
yeah.
that the replicants definitely take the place of the enslaved.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be kind of the metaphor of the whole thing is like, oh, they are like the oppressed people in this world. They're the ones that are getting stomped on. Like in the first one, the line comes to mind. It's like that's how it feels to be a slave when they're fighting on the roof,
Yeah,
and Roy says that. Yeah, so it's kind of like it is kind of the metaphor of taking the place of that.
yeah, and then living in fear because you are a slave.
Yeah, yeah. How does it feel to live in fear? Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense.
Really, I got a lot of questions about the Tyrell Corp or the Wallace Corporation now,
Hmm.
and I know probably explains more in that short. I want to see what they do with. Surprisingly enough, I want to see what they do with the Leto character, if he's going to lose his mind.
Yeah, I feel like he's basically on the brink of losing his mind, and the
Oh no, no, his
producer.
his mind's lost.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. His mind's lost.
he's pretty. He has a pretty intense god complex.
Oh yeah, just like the real Jared Leto. But we digress.
It fits perfectly.
Um, Yeah, like I mean, he's still rocking like the Jesus beard, you know.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. In the metaphorical, religious statements. Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like he himself says like I'm father to millions, and well, you're not really like acting like a father. You want to enslave all your children.
yeah. I do want to see where they go with it because, like, I mean, for me, that was kind of the least explained part of the film, where like we do know what his motive is. Like, he does want to repopulate, but we don't know if he like is secretly in on it as well because they're doing exactly what they want, what he wants.
Hmm. That is true. I see his motivation as more of like conquering the stars, literally going back to the whole God complex. He talks about the human race being so strong that they could conquer Eden, or they could conquer Eden itself. Is that what he says?
Something like that. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
we can
he
storm
says
a.
like, yeah, the Tannhauser Gate, but yeah, he says like something like, "In my time as CEO, we've conquered 7 planets, but that's not
Nine.
enough. We
He
should
was like,
conquer
yeah.
stars."
He was like, we have colonized 9 planets, and it's like a child can count to 9 on their hand. We must conquer more,
Yeah,
and that's basically that's like him explaining his motives and why he wants to find this replicant that can have babies,
yeah, yeah.
and
And
that's
they bring him the child, and the child's working for them.
yeah, which also I found weird because how did they not know? I mean, I guess she could be really well hidden, but then that might contribute to the whole idea of, well, is she in on it, and then are they in on it? But the thing that has me a little worried is that they're really good at asking these questions, like they're good at presenting these mysteries. But how are they going to resolve these mysteries, or will they resolve these mysteries eventually in the movies? Because I've never personally saw the movie or the TV show Lost, but I feel like it kind of follows a similar trajectory where they were really good at asking these mysterious questions, and then the answers just kind of fell flat.
Yeah, but that was also what was good about the first one is that, well, at least in the other cuts, they don't really explain to you what is happening. You just kind of have to conjecture it for yourself. So I guess this could be in the same tradition, but at least I think the difference is a lot of the questions that they're asking in this film are more plot based. So it's not a matter of the ambiguity of the metaphysics. It's more about the ambiguity of like what's going to happen next. And so I guess there's a little bit more desire for resolve in that sense, but I do like it that they didn't explain everything. You
Yeah, and
can't.
I do too. I like that they don't explain it.
Yeah,
It sort of gives agency to the fans to create their own conclusions.
yeah, and that's like half the fun about it anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I really like that.
Yeah, so yeah, it keeps in the tradition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
I think that's about it, honestly. Unless there's anything else that we wanted to talk about.
I mean, mm, I want to touch on Gaff's brief appearance in the film. So Gaff is in there for about like less than a minute. He's given less than a minute of screen time, but in that less than a minute of screen time, he talks a lot about Deckard, and it was kind of like an outsider's view on the character of Deckard. And I think that he said a line that kind of explicitly shows that Deckard is a replicant, in that, well, he asked, "Well, what did you think of him?" And he's like, "I thought he wasn't long for this world." And he's like, "Why do you say that?" And it's like something in his eyes. And then he puts the sheep down on the table.
Oh yeah, it's in his
And
eyes.
in his
Yeah,
eyes, in his eyes. So I feel like that's an explicit thing. Like explicitly, Gaff is saying, "I think he's a replicant."
yeah, just under the eye. Yeah, I mean that. I was probably like 80% convinced. Now I'm like 99 because of that. That's
Yeah,
pretty explicit in my mind. Um, yeah, and I'm glad that they brought Gaff back at least for that one little bit because he was kind of in the background in the original film, and then he has the famous line, "But too bad she won't live, but anyway, who does?"
yeah,
Um, which is an important part about that film actually, and it also going back to the whole "it's in his eyes" thing. That's another clue, you know.
yeah. It's another clue into a movie built on clues.
Yeah, I guess one thing like to mention really quick. We've seen this kind of trend going on now. It started with Tron Legacy, where they're really trying to do like the motion capture face of
Mm,
people actors either in their younger state or resurrecting dead actors.
yeah,
The same thing with like Rogue One. We have a little bit of this in this film where
with Rachel.
they actually bring back Rachel for that minute that she's on screen.
Yeah. How did you think it looked?
I think it looked probably the best out of anyone that I've seen of that type. I could still tell personally, but a lot better than Rogue One in my opinion.
Yeah, Tarkin seemed kind of clayish at moments,
No,
but I
No,
feel like
I agree with you. That's the thing. Most people thought that Tarkin looked better. I thought he looked worse than Leia.
mm,
Personally, I don't
I
know
thought
about you, but I thought that Tarkin definitely looked more clay-like. Like you said.
I think that also I think that is because Leia is only on screen for what, like 5 seconds.
Yeah,
So if we put it side by side, I'm sure they wouldn't be too far off. But then, it also contributes to the fact that Rachel wasn't on screen for a whole lot of time, like
yeah,
Tarkin was. Tarkin was like a key part in Rogue One.
yeah. Well, actually, one good thing about Tarkin is that whoever they got to do the voice acting, like, sounds exactly like Peter Cushing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, they did a really good job of doing the voice acting in that one. But yeah, like, I mean, they're working towards getting it right. I felt that I don't know what you thought of it, but I think it was also because of the lighting, because it was naturally soft anyway,
Yeah,
that they could get away with it looking more soft, and therefore you hide a lot of the weird mesh of the CGI.
yeah. And then also, if you think about the quality of shooting in the 1980s, I mean, they definitely went for a certain effect, like a certain effect of how each character was specifically lit. Because we know that Ridley Scott was a crazy director that paid attention to every single detail. So if you like emanate that style, it will look like how you remember.
Yeah,
But I thought she looked pretty good. She looks, I mean, but it also makes sense if she didn't look perfect because she's a replicant.
yeah,
So if you can build that CG into your story where it might not be an exact copy, so the fact that it's CG doesn't matter as much because, this is a recreation.
yeah,
And that's just good storytelling.
yeah, and it works to their advantage. In that sense, I can't think of a movie before Tron Legacy that was trying to do that. Because remember in Tron Legacy, I don't know if you've seen it, but they try to make Jeff Bridges look like his '80s self again
Yeah, yeah, I
with
remember. Like
Clue.
a sort of Big Lebowski look almost.
Oh, I wouldn't. No, not Big Lebowski. Like
Even
earlier
younger,
than
you think?
that. No, no, no. They were making him look like clean shaven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They have them all clean shaven, like the '80s, like the original Tron Jeff Bridges. But yeah, like I
Hmm.
mean, that was the start of it, and then we got things like Rogue One, where they're bringing back Tarkin and Leia. Um, yeah, who knows what they'll do with it?
It just shouldn't be on screen for long enough for so the audience can like critique it to the point where it looks like a claymation type thing.
Yeah, and actually, now that I think about it, the Leia scene kind of worked to their disadvantage because it's so brightly lit in the pod that you can see all the detail in all its glory. At least in this movie, the lighting is has that yellowish hue that makes everything, like I said, look softer. So
Yeah,
there's like, I mean, if you have to light your scene exactly correctly in order to make it seem somewhat convincing.
yeah, that's a big part of it, I think too.
Yeah. It's almost like keeping Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now in the shadows to not reveal how fat he is. The out of body experience with the prostitute.
Oh, that was one of the trippiest love scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so the prostitute says, "I've been inside you, and let me tell you, there's not as much in there as you think." So that also contributed to my idea that like their relationship didn't mean that much. And that,
Yeah.
well, she might legitimately think that she loves Ryan Gosling's character and that it's real, but really it's just programming, and she's just programmed to love whoever buys her.
Yeah. But that doesn't make the like like I think we were touching on, it doesn't make her love any less legitimate though. It's just uh it is fake though. It is programmed. Is does she actually realize something about herself, or is it more superficial?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. I don't know. Blade Runner asks a lot of these questions and then doesn't answer them, so all we can do is hypothesize.
Yeah, and do what we're doing right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for coming on.
No
It was good
problem.
talking to you about the infinite possibilities of the Blade Runner movies.
No problem. You should watch those shorts with Leto and Batista.
Yeah.
And anybody who hasn't should watch those for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're great primers.